different departments, including engineering department, like our department, dev and QA. So the common themes everyone was struggling with is there's a lack of ownership where when a ticket gets or when a project gets created, nobody owns the project. So the finish
Mm-hmm.
line is very blurry. They don't know where to go. There's no transparency. My
Mm-hmm.
our team struggled with prioritization because they were getting multiple priorities and they didn't know how to handle that. And when that happens, there's no engagement. So they lose engagement and resource allocation was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The dev and QA wanted to have innovation because they wanted to have some freedom to innovate within the uh, project to get do
Mm-hmm.
something new and bring some new tool, but there was such a hard deadline that they couldn't innovate. And there were a
Mm-hmm.
lot of single point of failures. Everything was manually driven. Even deployments were manually driven. Testing was manually driven. All the knowledge was in one person's head, and if we go on PTO, we are screwed.
Mm-hmm.
And and above all this, the fundamental problem what we noticed is that our leadership, at the director level, we were all reactive. So it was a reactive leadership. We were so um, stuck upon putting out fires
Mm-hmm.
that we didn't have time to slow down and say, okay, what's causing this fire?
All right.
So this was one of the few reasons, and that everyone asked for a unified process, which was team driven, not project driven. So they want the team to be successful end of the day. So
Mm-hmm.
keeping those things in mind, I presented this to the CIO, and he said, "Yep, we should definitely revisit our STLC and see how we can improve it."
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it started. So they wanted more predictability, and
Mm-hmm.
they wanted clarity. They wanted to scale,
Mm-hmm.
accountability, and they want to be able to interact and collaborate. So we had to redo the process for that. So I
All right.
introduced Scrum and Agile.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean Scrum and Kanban under Agile. So Scrum for projects, which is anywhere from it can be a T-shirt size of large or extra large above and above. So those projects have to go in a Scrum methodology, and then the rest day-to-day production failures and things like that is Kanban. So there used
Mm-hmm.
to be two teams. From two teams, I proposed six teams, and now
Mm-hmm.
the ratio from dev to QA reduced from five devs to one QA to two devs and one QA, and they're in small teams, and so they can achieve a lot more.
All right. Perfect. All right. So, then you also mentioned that there was no documentation before this and that there was no information sharing, right?
hmm
Can you mention exactly what you did to tackle this?
So from a quality assurance perspective, I bought a tool called Zephyr. It's a test case automation tool, I mean
Mm-hmm.
documentation tool. It's not something that I really lobby for, and it's not my first preference. I worked with many other tools, but there's a certain budget constraints we have to go through.
Uh-huh.
So implemented Zephyr here, and then made sure all the test engineers, any project that they are working on, all the test cases are documented in that Zephyr tool. It's in fact opened up to the developers. So before even the developers hand off something for QA to test, they know what are the test cases that QA are going to use. That way, dev testing is enforced. So if developer one says, "Oh, it's I didn't build it that way," the
Mm-hmm.
QA guy can already say, "Hey, I have these test cases ready. Can you run these four happy paths? And if that doesn't pass, don't even give it to me because I'm going to fail your code anyway."
Mm-hmm.
So, so that transparency, that openness created a lot of synergy. So introducing that tool, forcing everyone to make sure, or encouraging, there's no force, we are all a team, right? But
Mm-hmm.
encouraging them, I introduced badges. So if somebody writes 10 test cases, they would get a badge. We had a conference page, so I would add a star for them, and every 10 stars, they would get an Amazon gift card as an example. So creating a lot of incentives to make sure they are working towards that goal. And I would get weekly reports. I would review them and sit down with them on my weekly one-on-ones and see, okay, how can I help you improve your test case coverage and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
From
Perfect.
yeah, and from a developer perspective, I also requesting the same thing from the director of engineering, asking them to document architectural diagrams and mind
Mm-hmm.
maps. If that's the only way QA can think about all the scenarios to document, and even project and product management can think about how the product works. So the lead developers had to that we created a task for them. They had to make sure that they
Mm-hmm.
document their architectural decisions that they have made as a part of the project.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. All right. So
The
then, yeah, sorry.
one more thing, what I
Yeah.
thought about right now is uh, like uh, I stopped calling them tribal knowledge because people took
Mm-hmm.
it personally. Because then I started calling them as knowledge pillars. So if
Mm-hmm.
you are a knowledge pillar for a certain product, you were identified as a knowledge pillar and you had that documented in Confluence. So the personal, I mean the professional goal for the
Mm-hmm.
year for that knowledge pillar is to document everything and train one other person. And if they do that
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the year, they know they have met their personal, I mean professional goal. And I also would give them a something called like a half a day off on the stage that they can
Mm-hmm.
go and have fun and then relax and things like that. Many other incentives that we had to think of to help them get there.
That's nice. So, would you say that there was an improvement in morale as a result?
I'm sorry.
Was the team happier?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The end of the day now, if someone goes on vacation, they don't feel like they don't know what's happening. So they go look up Confluence, they know how to fix it, and the person who
Mm-hmm.
comes back from vacation knows that they're not coming back to a mess.
Yeah, that's important also.
Yeah,
Perfect. All right. So, and then you also established some metrics here, right? Some KPIs.
right, right.
So, were there no KPIs in place before?
Yes, there was no KPIs before.
So, mm, can you elaborate on the KPIs that you did establish? I think you mentioned a completion rate and some quality readiness.
Yes. So what I did was the first thing, the basic KPI I started with was automation coverage, and then uh, test case documentation coverage. So that I started with within the team. Okay, now how do I do it, right? Then the
Mm-hmm.
next one I started doing is let me look up that email. Usually looking up those emails help. Okay. So first w- things first is like, okay, let's improve my team. Let's bring some
Mm-hmm.
structure to the team that I have under my control. So we started talking about completion rate, how much test case coverage you're documenting, and what is your completion rate end of the sprint? Are you able to meet those goals? Then the next one I started doing is talk to the developer, the director of
Mm-hmm.
developing more, and identify what can we measure.
Mm-hmm.
So once we identified what can we measure, we started implementing that in Jira. So
Mm-hmm.
incremental delivery to QA. So as soon as its code review is done, how long does it sit in code review? How soon does it go to QA? So small matrices we started tracking. How is the what's the ratio of defects that's coming from production? How many defects are we start catching before it goes to production? And once
Mm-hmm.
it goes to production, how many defects are we tracking? What's the turnaround for the production defects to be fixed? And
Mm-hmm.
what's the turnaround for the development? I mean, the defect that's not made it to production yet to be fixed. So these are the turnaround completion ratio we started seeing, and how many tickets are rolling from one sprint to the other. And if
Mm-hmm.
they're rolling, how can we help them? So every year I mean every sprint, we started tracking the burn down chart. Burn down chart is already given in Jira, but these
Mm-hmm.
were like minor, furthermore, minor pieces that we had to identify and see, okay, how do we bridge that gap? So dev
Mm-hmm.
and QA KPIs we started presenting to the CIO to see how
Mm-hmm.
we are, the process. So now we have implemented a new process, right? They want to see how is if the process is working or not.
Mm-hmm.
So the KPIs, the matrix will help us show, okay, the process is working or it needs to be fixed here, it needs to some help here and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
once we fixed dev and QA, then we started attacking product requirements
Mm-hmm.
gathering, how many tickets are revisited within the sprint and how requirements gathering is working. So it's a very minute, I don't know if you want that much detail, but it was a lot of work. So the tickets, are they coming
Mm-hmm.
into the sprint? Are they clearly defined? If they're not clearly defined, how many tickets actually get reshaken while the developer is actually working on it? So because that's a
Mm-hmm.
clear matrix and a measurement to show why the team is not able to complete their sprint, because we are changing the requirements on them and we as leaders have to fix it. So
Mm-hmm.
bringing up those real issues to the executive team, opening their eyes, and then when they started seeing the measures, they started taking a step